Now I want to do a simple project where we can work with the box model of an element. Let's see on my monitor right now. You can see the final effect on your screen. What we got here is one single div with this blue color. Its height is set to 50% of the browser window. When we expand our browser window, it's still 50%. When we make it smaller, it's still 50%. And its width is set to 100%, as you can see, as long as we will get to the point where our whole website is wider than 1400 pixels. As you can see right now, then our div stops growing. It has still 1400 pixels of its width, and it's centered from the left and the right on our website. And this is usually how we center our whole website in our project. We want our website to be 100% width on the smaller screens, like smartphones, for example. It could be also 100% on bigger screens, like tablets, for example, or even some small old school monitors. But when we are viewing our website on the HD monitor, a wide monitor, we usually don't want our website to be such wide to make it full screen wide. So we set it to its max value, for example, to 1400 pixels, and we center it in the middle, just as you can see right now. Now let's make this project from scratch. You can see on my monitor that I have a starting structure of my HTML file and a live preview on my right side of the screen, so we are ready to get started to work. First thing I want to do is to create a div with the class of wrapper in my body tag, like this. And this is usually a container that wraps our whole website. In our case, it would be a visual representation of our whole website. So now let's create a style tag in our head tag, like this. Let's refer to our wrapper, and let's set some styles to it. We know its width is 100% by default, so we actually don't have to place it right here. But let's keep this in this project just for the clarity and the readability of the code. But what we want and have to place is its max width. And we want to set our max width to 1400 pixels. So that's how it's going to work. Our div will have 100% of the width of our body tag, so its parent element. So that would be the whole browser window, until our browser window will get 1400 pixels. If our browser window will get bigger, our div with the class of wrapper will stay at 1400 pixels. When we make our browser window smaller once again, it will once again get to the value of 100%. Now let's set its height, and we want to set its height to 50% of the browser window. So we can place percentages right here, because it would be 50% of the body tag, and we don't have height specified to our body tag. So we want our height of the wrapper div be referred always to the browser window. So we have to use the viewport units, in this case, the viewport height. 50 viewport height is 50% of the viewport height, so 50% of the height of the browser window, always, no matter how big or small the parent of this element is. Now let's place a background color to it, so we can see it, like this. Let's save our file, and we can see it exactly right here. Now you can see those margins of the body tag, so let's get rid of those. We can do it by setting our style reset, as we know, the asterisk symbol, and we can set margin of every element to 0. Just like this. And now we can see that our div is 100% width of its parent width. And in this case, since we get rid of those margins of the body tag, it's 100% of our browser window. Now let's see the effect. Or just, for now, let's delete this max width because I want to show you clearly. Now all we have is the width 100%. So no matter how big or small our browser window is, our div will be always 100% of the browser window. Now, if we place this property max width with the value of 1400 pixels, we'll get something like this. Our div is 100% width until it reaches 1400 pixels, as you can see exactly right now. And as you can see, this element aligns to the left edge of the browser window, and we'll get the free space on the right side of this element. Now we want to center, because this will be the whole website, our whole website. In this div, we'll place all the elements of our website. This is a wrapper, the elements that wraps our whole website. So this blue element is the representation of our website. So we want it to be always in the middle of the screen. When our screen is bigger, I mean wider than 1400 pixels. What we have to do to achieve this goal is to set the margin property to our wrapper. So let's do it. Let's place it here, because as I said before, in our CSS rules, we should place, first of all, the properties responsible for the display and the position of our element, then everything determining its size, so the width, the height, then the properties responsible for the box model, so for example the margin, and at the end, only the visual aspects like colors, fonts, and properties related to the text. So let's place our margin property right here. And as we should know already, we want to use the value of 0 auto. This way we will set our margin top and margin bottom to 0 and our margin left and margin right to auto. So take all the free space beside this element and place it equally on the left and the right side of the element so that our element will be centered. Let's save our file and see the effect. Let's check it out. Now you can see it already, but let me just place it like this. Our element gets 100% of the width of the browser window until it reaches 1400 pixels. Then it stays at this max width, which is 1400 pixels, and it stays in the center of our screen, exactly like this. And this would be our whole website. Let's place it how it was. Now let's place some text into our div. For example, lorem 1000, like this. That's a lot of text, as you can see. Let's save it. And we can see that our text goes beyond our element because we have a lot of text and we have a stiff value set to the height of our element. And by default, if our text, our content of the element doesn't fit into the element, it will go beyond it. If we want to avoid such a situation, we can change the height of our element to minimum height. So we tell the browser that our element is supposed to have its height at 50 VH, which is 50% of the browser window of the viewport height, at minimum. But if it requires more space, it should expand itself. Now let's see when we save our file. This is the effect. Our minimum height now is 50% of the browser window. But if we have a lot of content in our element that requires it to expand itself, it will expand. If we'll just delete the most of the text like this and save the file, we can see that we have small amount of text, but our div keeps its minimum height, which is set here to 50 VH. Now let's go back how it was. Here we have a lot of text once again. Let's change this minimum height to height once again. So we will get the same effect, that our height is stiffly set to 50% of the browser window. And if we don't want our text or our other content to go beyond our element, and we don't want our element to expand, we can use overflow property with the value of hidden. Then this part of the text that go beyond our element will not be visible. Just like this. It's still there in the code. It's still there in the document object model, but it's not visible on our website, and we cannot even mark it or highlight it because it's not even rendered. But let's delete this for now, like this. And if we delete our height property from here, the height will be set to auto. So now the height of our element expands or decreases according to the text inside. Now we can see we have smaller amount of text, so our element is as well smaller. If we delete more text, we can see our element is very small now. But if we set its height back to 50 VH, it'll be still bigger. We can also use the max height value with no problem. Now it's related to the content, but if we will just get much more of the text, it will grow until it reaches 50% of the window and it stops growing. We can set them however we want. These are the benefits of the block elements. Now let's delete the whole text from here. Like this. And we can as well set minimum height and maximum height with no problem. Let's say we wanted to have 30 viewport height as the minimum and 60 viewport height as the maximum, just like this. So now even if our element is empty, it will still get 30% of the browser's height. And when we add some text into it, it will grow. As you can see on your screen, it will get even bigger, as you can see right now, until it reaches 60% of the height of the browser window. Then you can see it stop getting bigger and the text go beyond it. And now if we want our text to be hidden, we can use our overflow hidden property. Then our text doesn't go beyond our element. This is more or less how this works. Now I want to show you something else. Let's look at my monitor. I have simple project right here. In the body tag, I have two div elements, one with the class of rect1, the second with the class of rect2. We can see them on the preview. I set some styles referring to the div tag, so applying to all the div elements on our website, which you can also see. And now I would like to style our first element. So let's go to our style tag and let's refer to it by the class, and let's set its padding. For example, to 20 pixels. So I placed those two elements and I want to style the first one so you could see the differences between the default div and a custom styled div. So let's get this padding to our first element. Let's save our file like this. Of course, nothing happened, and that's because I wrote my selector wrong. I referred to class of rect, and we don't have such a class in our document because we have rect1 and rect2. So this might be a common error in your work as well. So it's always good to check these kind of things. And I'm usually happy when some error appears because it's totally natural. And I want to show you that something like this can happen in your work or study and what you should pay attention to. So now our selector is correct, I hope. Let's see it. And you can see it already on your screen. We set the padding of 20 pixels to each side of this element, and we can see it right here. We have 20 pixel space from every side of our element, separating the content of our element from its edges. Now let's see it in our DevTools. When you open your DevTools, let's hide this element tab for now. Now expand it a little bit. If you open your DevTools in the styles overlap as well as in the computed overlap, you will see the box model of your selected element. Let's select our first element, and if you hover on it in your DevTools, you can already see this area that is representing our padding right here. It's clearly visible, and when you click it, you can also see our padding right here in the representation of the box model of our element in the DevTools. Here we can see clearly the content box, which is displayed in our browser as well, as you can see. Our padding box, which now is displayed on our website as well. As well, we get the border box, which we didn't set yet to our element, and our margin box. Everything here is visible, and you can check it, changing the box model of your element, and see the effect, which influences the whole website. The same situation is in the computed tab, where we can see our box model as well, our content box, padding box, border box, and our margin box. Now let's go back to our element. Let's add, for example, a border to our element. Let it be 10 pixels, solid red. You can use those values in order however you want. It could be red, solid 10 pixels with no problem, or however you want to write it. It doesn't matter for the browser, but I usually set it like this. First the border width, which is 10 pixels, then the border style, which is solid, and then the border color, which is red. And as you may know, you can place it in separate properties like border width, 10 pixels, border style, solid, and border color, which would be red. As you can see, those three properties can be defined with this one property of border, placing three values, 10 pixels as the border width, solid as the border style, and red as the border color. Let's save our file and see the changes. Like this. We can already see our border of this element in our browser. Let's select this element like this. And we have our box model. We have our content highlighted right now. We have our padding highlighted, our border, which you can see right now. And you can see our margin, which we didn't include yet. Pay attention that in the representation of our box model in the DevTools, we can see the actual size of this element. We got 898 pixels by 34 pixels for our content, 20 pixels of padding on each side of the box, 10 pixels of the border each side of the box, and now we'll get to our margin. Let's say we want our margin to 50 pixels. Let's save our file, and voila. You can see that our element now is separated from the other element and from the edges of the browser window by 50 pixels margin. And that's exactly what we can see in the DevTools in the representation of our box model, where now margin is highlighted. We can see it's 50 as its actual value. Then we have the border of our element, which is 10 pixels, our padding, which is 20 pixels, and in the middle of it, our content. So this is how the box model looks like, how we can work with it, how we can modify it, and how we can see the instant changes in the DevTools to make our work more comfortable and enjoyable. Now, if we are at the margin property, we can see that our first rectangle has the margin of 50 pixels, which we can see right here. And we can already see it in our DevTools that its margin bottom is 50 pixels. But to see it more clearly, what I want to show you, let's change our margin property to the margin bottom property. Now we can see that we have our margin even in the representation of the box model in the DevTools, that we don't have margin top, margin left, and margin right, but only the margin bottom, which is 50 pixels, and we can clearly see it in our website. So now let's refer to our second div, which is rect2, and let's set its margin top to 50 pixels as well. So this is what I was talking about in the theory. Since the first one has the margin bottom of 50 pixels and the second one has the margin top of 50 pixels, they should be separated with 100 pixels space. But when we save our file, we can see that nothing changed. When we select our first div, we can see that it clearly has 50 pixels margin on the bottom. If we select our second div, we can also see that it has 50 pixels margin on the top. Here you can clearly see the whole box model, that it's empty. We have only the content and only the top margin, and that's exactly what we set to our element, because we have no padding, as you can see right here, no border, and no other margins. But what I wanted to show you is that this element has margin top of 50 pixels. This element has margin bottom of 50 pixels, and those two margins don't add up. This space is still 50 pixels. If we will get margin bottom of the first element to 20 pixels and the margin top of the second element to 30 pixels, then the bigger value wins and determines the space between these elements. Let's check it out. And you can see now the space is set to 30 pixels. We can see the 20 pixels of the margin bottom of the first element and 10 pixels of the free space, because the margin top of the second element has the bigger value, which is 30 pixels, and that will be the space separating two elements when one is below other. Now I will show you something else. I'll modify my project right now. Let's set the width to 200 pixels, the height to 200 pixels as well, maybe to 300 so we can see it better, like this. Let's copy these properties to our second rectangle, or in this case now the square, so that they are the same, and I want them to be aligned in one line for now. I'll use the float property, which we will learn about later in this course, so don't pay too much attention to it, but I just want to show you some example when we have two elements set next to each other. I'll go to the div rule, set float left like this, and now we can see that we have our two elements next to each other in one line. I'll set those margins not to margin bottom but to margin and 50 pixels just to separate them like this, and this is what you will see. Let's check the first div. We can see it has its margin of 50 pixels, as well as the second div, which also has the margin of 50 pixels on each side. So between those elements we'll get the space of 100 pixels, because margin left and margin right add up to each other. So in this case it will be a double value, because this keeps its margin on the right side, this one keeps its margin on the left side. Both have 50 pixels, so we have 100 pixels between them. And I wanted to show you this because that doesn't apply to the margin top and margin bottom, which we can see when I delete the float left property. It's 50 pixels, as you can see. This one has 50 pixels on the bottom, this one has 50 pixels on the top. They don't add to each other. We don't have 100 pixels right here, but it's only 50 pixels. Now let's go back to some theory.